let's hope we have a very good meeting where we have a consensus to join together and do our best. Okay. Thank you very much.
Good evening, councillors and members of the public. The Mayor has asked me to say the following. The Council is going to debate an emotive subject tonight, about which people feel very strongly. However, you should all be warned that you should not interrupt councillors who are speaking in the debate. If you do so, then the Council's rules, which are the law of the land for these purposes, allow the Mayor, who is the chair of this meeting, to have you removed from the room if necessary. He trusts that this won't be necessary. The relevant rule says that if a member of the public interrupts proceedings, the Mayor will warn the person concerned. If they continue to interrupt, the Mayor will order their removal from the meeting room. Finally, a brief word of explanation as to what's going to happen tonight. A motion will be proposed and seconded by two councillors and debated by all councillors who wish to do so. Other councillors may move amendments to that motion, and any amendments will also be debated. There are strict rules about how long and how often councillors can speak, and it is the Mayor's job to enforce those rules, and he assures you that he will enforce them. Thank you.
Have we any apologies?
Yes, Mr Mayor, apologies from Councillor Sarah Colvin-Price, David Colvin-Price, Councillor Martin Stone, Councillor David Greer, Councillor Ash Suckley. Mr Mayor, with your permission, I have an email from Councillor Martin Stone. He may have emailed Jane. Has it not emailed yet? He wants me to read something out with your permission if I'll do that later.
Thank you.
Mr Mayor, can I give apologies for Councillor Susan Land, who's otherwise committed or she would have been at this special meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. The declaration of interest. Have we got any declaration of interest now, please? No? No, thank you. Right. Notice of motion. To be moved by Councillor Mahmood and seconded by Councillor Hannon. Would you like to speak, sir? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move this motion on Palestine and Israel as set out, with the addition of, in number 1, F, all parties stop all violence. Mr Mayor, like everyone who has contacted me, the people of Pendle are shocked at the images that we see coming from Palestine every day. The number of innocent people indiscriminately killed is truly unbearable and heartbreaking. I believe that all civilians, Palestinians and Israelis, must be protected at all costs. All lives matter. The response of the Israeli government cannot justify the deaths of innocent civilians in Palestine, including thousands of children. I was reading and watching this morning a father holding body parts of his son. It's truly heartbreaking. This shouldn't be happening in this day and age, Mr Mayor. You know, in history terms, you know, we need to learn from our history, and I think that we really do need to put a stop to this. Both Israel and Hamas must abide by international law, including international humanitarian law, both in response to the shocking Hamas attack on 7th of October, killing innocent Israelis, and the continuing bombardment of Palestine. I unequivocally demand for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages in this war. Within a couple of days of these events, as a Labour Group leader, working with my colleagues here in Pendle and across East Lancashire, we were one of the first in the country to write to Rishi Sunak, who is the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, demanding immediate ceasefire and to open humanitarian corridors. I have had personal meetings with Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy, Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, to lobby for an immediate ceasefire, to open humanitarian corridors and lasting peace. We have been doing everything possible as councillors to bring an end to the current war. The present onslaught looks like an act of vengeance. I feel it will become a sustained attack on the Palestinian people, and not just to destroy Hamas as the Israeli government claims. When the Israeli officials claim that they are bombing targets, people in Gaza report that flattening of hospitals, schools, residential buildings. All this is against international law and it's against the Geneva Convention. This is collective punishment, and killing of civilians has won the backing of some international leaders who justify it as Israel's right to self-defense against Hamas. But as Daniel Levy, one-time advisor to the former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, he asked a BBC presenter, "Can someone credibly tell me that when the leadership of a country says we are cutting off food, electric, water, all supplies to an entire civilian population, that they are targeting militants?" Some may believe that Hamas is the whole problem here, yet it's vital to understand that military occupation of Palestinian land existed long before Hamas came into existence. According to Amnesty International, the world's leading human rights organization, Israel imposes a system of oppression and domination against Palestinians across all areas under its control. Perhaps realizing that revenge doesn't bring security will be one of the ways to start talking peace process. Surely stopping this carnage will require international pressure on Israel, especially our government and the Americans, followed by pressure on all sides to start negotiation to end the war, even if it means forcing key players to find peace. I, as leader of the Council, am calling for lasting peace and reiterate my position that the creation of a Palestinian state remains the best way to bring peace and security to the region. Israelis and Palestinians have the right to live in peace and security. Without a political settlement, we are bound to run again into a never-ending cycle of violence. Mr. Mayor, I remember almost exactly 11 years ago, on 18th of December 2012, as a council we formed a twinning with Beit Lead, because this council and I as the mayor did that. Mr. Mayor, our shared future is based on the belief that all human beings are equal and deserving of respect and safety. This is how I was raised, and these are our British values. The only future is that of hope and peace. Please stop this war now and bring lasting peace. I'll move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors. I would like to second the motion, but before I do, I would like to take a few minutes to discuss the horrific atrocities that we are witnessing before our eyes. As a Muslim, it is my belief, and I'm sure this is shared by people of all faiths, that if anyone kills a single human being, it is as though they've killed mankind, regardless of being Jewish, Muslim, Christian, or of no faith. There are many aspects of this conflict I can focus on. However, I will endeavour to stick to the UK leadership and their response. My fellow councillors will discuss some of the other aspects of this conflict. The values and morals Britain promotes across the world are human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and human rights. The Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition both believe in these values. Mr. Mayor, the response to Gaza has highlighted the hypocrisy of these values and morals. Today, these values feel like a slogan. It doesn't seem like they mean anything or have any power. How else can we explain the despicable response of UK leadership to the slaughter in Gaza? When did our UK leaders lose their humanity? After 7 weeks of bloodshed, over 12,000 killed, of which 68% of people killed are women and children. They have stopped counting the number of children killed. After 5,000 have been counted, one child killed every few minutes. Just think about this for a moment and let it sink in. In Gaza, nobody is going to school. Nobody knows where their future is. Hospitals have become a place of destruction and not of curing. No one has seen anything like this before. It's complete and utter carnage. The UK leadership to date has not called for ceasefire. They are asking for a pause in the bombing, which will be followed by IDF's continuation of ethnic cleansing. This, in my humble opinion, is genocide. Who are these people? Who are the people being murdered? They are innocent children, women, journalists, doctors, aid workers, newborn babies, the sick and the elderly. Mr. Mayor, in my opinion, and the opinion of my constituents, Israel has shown they can kill any and every person in Gaza wherever he wants. Israel has behaved in a way that suggests that 2.3 million people are terrorists or terrorist sympathizers or human shields. Israel cannot use these reasons to justify their inaccurate and indiscriminate targeting. Mr. Mayor, it is finally good to see a pause in the callous killings, with the exchange of hostages from both sides taking place. Finally, humanitarian aid is being delivered into Gaza. In the past 4 days, how many lives have been saved? For every day in the pause, hundreds of lives are being saved. This is why we and the people across the globe have been demanding a ceasefire and not a pause. No more blood needs to be spilled. We must also demand for a two-state solution. Unfortunately, for many years, the world leaders have been talking about this. But now it is time for international powers to push with more force for a two-state solution. Mr. Mayor, the following point sums up the feeling of the Palestinians. I woke up, I have no running water, I have no food to eat, I have no clothes to wear, life is difficult, I am still thankful. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I reject the policies adopted by the national political leadership to this war, whether in government or in opposition. To them I say, not in my name. Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The two previous speakers have spoken about faith, and I have no faith. I am a humanist, and I think that is the majority of people in Britain now who on the census declare that they don't have a religion. So the wars over religion, to me, are incomprehensible. But we have a situation in Gaza, in Palestine, in Israel, where those faiths contribute towards the conflict that has been going on for well over 100 years now. And Britain is not blameless in the situation that there is in Palestine. During the First World War, there were promises made to the Arab communities which were not honoured, and in fact Britain acted in rather despicable fashion. And then in succeeding decades straddled two horses, and of course ultimately part of Palestine became the nation of Israel, and we've had successive wars in the 1960s, the Yom Kippur War, the current conflict. The victims are overwhelmingly, all those conflicts, are children on both sides. And I think that common humanity demands that there is an end to these wars. Here we are in the Penal Council chamber. I don't think any of us have any of the answers as to how we can stop those wars, but we can add our calls to those of others for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. And Mr. Mayor, I wish to move a very small amendment to the resolution that's been put, which I'll come to in a moment. I speak, Mr. Mayor, as the Chairman of Pendle's Community Safety Partnership, as well as my hat as a councillor here. And I think that the impact on our communities here in Pendle is an important one that we need to consider. Community cohesion is not served by what is happening hundreds, thousands of miles away in Gaza. We have seen striking and appalling instances in Pendle of hate crimes which I am thoroughly sickened and ashamed of. The situation in Gaza feeds polarisation and extremism, and none of that is helping to have a peaceful Pendle, never mind the appalling things that are happening in Palestine. So, Mr. Mayor, I can see the light is on. The amendment that I wish to move is to simply add two words, and it's the sentence after the final bullet point, where it says, "This council therefore resolves to publicly back an immediate ceasefire in the region by all parties and the unconditional release of all hostages." And I wish to insert "and permanent." So it would read that this council therefore resolves to publicly back an immediate and permanent ceasefire in the region. And I so move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. We have an acceptance of the amendment. Thank you. Mr. Rutherford.
It doesn't really matter now, we're just speaking about the lights. It's a very important meeting, and it's too late now, but I wanted to turn the lights off so people can have a reasonable conversation, not restricted by 5 minutes. But in front of the people, that's truly important.
I think, Councillor Rutherford, sometimes things do order wrong. which we know about, but we do try to say that it is.
Okay, just thought I'd mention.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Mr. Mayor, I would wholeheartedly agree with the motion that's been presented to us here. However, we have an amendment which my leader, Councillor Iqbal, will be presenting when he gives his speech. Mr. Mayor, we all here agree that with the motion, but some points missing. I think everyone here condemns the loss of innocent lives wherever it happens. Mr. Mayor, what's happened after October the 7th isn't a war. It has been genocide and a massacre of over 15,000 innocent civilians, men, women, and over 5,000 children. Mr. Mayor, Israel has used sophisticated attack jets and naval vessels to bomb densely crowded refugee camps, schools, apartment blocks, mosques, churches, hospitals, to attack a population that has no air force, no air defence, no navy, no heavy weapons, no army, and it calls it a war. Sadly, sorry, Mr. Mayor, it is not a war, it is a murder. Mr. Mayor, I know our local leaders, led by Councillor Ashjad, Councillor Nadeem, Councillor Azarali, have been lobbying the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. They've met with senior members, senior ministers. However, with all due respect, this has fallen on deaf ears. This was shown when the Prime Minister visited Israel, and he actually said in his speech, "I hope you win," as if it was a football game. Shame on them. The respect our MP showed Councillor Nadeem and the whole party, in my opinion, to not even bother to turn up to vote for a ceasefire. What else can I say? Mr. Mayor, then the opposition leader, my ex-leader, Sir Keir Starmer, actually said it was fine to withhold water, gas, electricity from Gaza, which broke every international law going. And then he threatened his shadow cabinet ministers and MPs, if you voted for a ceasefire, you would be sacked. I think it was 10 ministers, if I'm wrong, please correct me, 10 ministers who actually either resigned and voted for a ceasefire. Mr. Mayor, credit to all those MPs who actually voted for a ceasefire, no matter which political party they belong to. I think the only political party which none of these MPs voted for a ceasefire was the Conservatives. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Over the last 6 weeks, Mr. Mayor, all we heard from Rishi Sunak, Sir Keir Starmer, was humanitarian pause, humanitarian pause. What does that mean? Okay, we won't bomb you for 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, we'll clothe you, we'll feed you, we'll supply you with electricity, then we will bomb the living daylights out of you again. Shame on them. Shame on them. Sorry.
I know we have all emotions about this, but we are here to try and find a solution. Going backwards and forwards.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, I will be giving you what my solution is.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was the reason myself, Councillor Iqbal, Councillor Rehan, who's sat upstairs, resigned from the Labour Party. I could not support a leader, Sir Keir Starmer, who was supporting genocide and the ethnic cleansing of millions of Palestinians in Gaza. I was called, from my own colleagues, I was called a coward, I was called lost, I was called spineless, for example. But believe you me, Mr. Mayor, I'd rather be called all that than support a leader who has quite clearly shown from the beginning he supports mass murder, genocide, and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Mr. Mayor, today I stand here with humanity, and most of all, I stand here with the 2.5 million Palestinians who are living in an open prison, according to the new Foreign Minister, David Cameron. Mr. Mayor, enough is enough. Palestine will be free. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The loss of any innocent life is a tragedy, which is why the perpetrator should be condemned, irrespective of whoever he is. One cannot condemn the loss of innocent lives, yet seek to justify the loss of others. All human lives are equal. I condemn all forms of terrorism, including the disproportionate use of force, which has killed thousands of innocent Palestinians. The humanitarian tragedy we have all witnessed is a direct result of the IDF's bombardment of the Palestinian people. To say it's self-defence, this argument in itself is fundamentally flawed, as Israel is an occupying force. There's context, there's history to the suffering of the Palestinian people. 75 years of occupation. The question needs to be asked, who is the occupier and who is the occupied? How can one claim self-defence and be an occupying force? This is a legal point which is not widely debated. Even, for instance, if we do accept that it's self-defence, how can it be self-defence when hospitals, schools, refugee camps, mosques, churches, entire residential areas are flattened, all in the name of self-defence, they say? It is not self-defence to withdraw food, water, medicine and electricity to an entire population. It is not self-defence when fleeing people are bombed. It is not self-defence when basic rights are denied to an entire population. It is not self-defence when Palestinians are denied the right to return to their homes. It is not self-defence when Palestinians are forced out of their homes. It is not self-defence when disproportionate use of force has resulted in the deaths of thousands of innocent women, children and other innocent people. Let's call it what it is. It is collective punishment of Palestinian people. This is in contravention of Article 33 of the Geneva Convention. But what does the Israeli government care about international law when they are given political cover by the US and our government? This has been the same story for the past 75 years. Enough is enough. Collective punishment is a war crime. Punishing an entire population is a war crime. Let's look at the intent of the Israeli government. The Israeli government, including their defence minister, Yoav Gallant, describing Palestinians as human animals and ordered a complete siege of Gaza. Their energy minister said there should be no electricity, food or water. Their heritage minister said block Gaza and flatten everything there is there and give the land to the settlers. The threat of nuclear weapons was well documented on the news, and the list goes on. This is not about the Israeli people, this is the ideology of the Israeli government, which is about war, not peace. Let's turn to the West Bank. There's no Hamas in the West Bank, yet the illegal occupation and illegal settlements continue even today. A deliberate policy of the government. Settlers are given immunity, they're given weapons and protection by the IDF, forcing people out of their homes. I'm glad to hear Lord David Cameron and the change in some of the language, but what's that going to achieve? United Nations resolutions have been ignored for decades. The ceasefire. Yes, there is a temporary ceasefire, as the previous speaker mentioned, but that's not good enough. The killings will continue as soon as this temporary ceasefire finishes. That's been made clear by the Israeli government. We must stand up for the principles we claim and preach to others, namely freedom, justice and peace. Or do we pick and choose when these principles apply? The double standards and hypocrisy is clear for all to see. The government must seek an immediate and permanent ceasefire. Where is the humanity? The international community, including our government, could have and should have done more. They could have stopped the killing of innocent civilians, yet instead sat on their hands and did nothing. Same story for the past 75 years. The government's lack of impartiality and unconditional support of Israel has resulted in unreputable damage of the British government on the world stage, not calling for a ceasefire, not asking Israel to stop the killings. Why is it so hard to say ceasefire now? Stop the killings now. What has happened to humanity? Where is the humanity? Yeah, I'm summing up. I think it's summed up that some lives don't matter as much as others. Our residents are rightly here and concerned about this issue, and we should all unite and show solidarity with the people of Palestine, and let's support this motion unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I give notice of an amendment, please, as well?
Sorry?
Notice of an amendment.
Right.
Yeah, a friendly amendment, if I may.
Okay.
Do you want to do it now, or...?
Yes, please.
Just, Mr. Mayor, I forgot to mention where it says the Council asks, also resolves to ask the Chief Executive to write to the Prime Minister. Rather than just writing to the Prime Minister, can we write to the Leader of the Opposition and the Leader of the Lib Dems?
Okay, thank you.
The Lib Dems did vote.
Could we, could you accept it? Right, thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm certain that every human in this chamber and beyond agrees that this crisis needs to end now. Is 4 days long enough for the injured to heal? Is it long enough for innocent people to deal with colossal trauma? Is it long enough for Palestinians to rebuild their homes? Is it long enough for food, water, clothes, blankets, nappies for children, sanitary towels for women, medical supplies, pain relief for amputees to get into Gaza and the West Bank and distribute it to where it's needed? The answer is no. This pause must turn into a permanent ceasefire. There are two areas that must need urgent attention. The first being that the root cause of this continued crisis is since 1948. The crisis did not begin on October the 7th. Actions to stop the massacre and the Palestinians and end the occupation must be taken with absolute acknowledgement of Israel's 75 years of oppression. Laws have been broken by the Israeli government, and they have had effective control for decades. Israel controls the skies, the seas, the fishermen, the entry and exit of everything. This is why Israel was able to cut off food, water and electricity instantly. The Palestinians do not have basic human rights. Israel does not respect or abide by international laws. The second area is the focus of language used by our political leaders. The crisis in the Middle East has exposed the double standards and hypocrisy displayed by our leaders. British values, the Equality Act, are words paid with lip service. Some questions to consider. How did the UK respond to the Ukrainian occupation? Is our response to the Palestinian occupation the same? Did our PM offer full support to the Israeli president? Was this offer the same to the Russian president? Does throwing rocks at a tank make you a terrorist? Does bombing innocent people make you a heroic defender of your country? Our PM gave a speech in which he said the British Jews will be fully supported against hate in this country. Mr. Mayor, where is the support for the British Palestinians, the British Muslims, the British Christians? Of course we need to crack down on anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or any form of hate, but this must be done on a level playing field. Some people in the UK may say this is an international affair. We need to focus on the UK. Yes, we have our own huge challenges, but what this international genocide has highlighted is the character of our political leaders. Sacking MPs who called for a ceasefire, a Home Secretary when in office constantly created hate and division. Any criticism of Israel leaves you suspended with an anti-Semite label. Mr. Mayor, if our political leaders are serious about being involved in the peace process for Israel and Palestine, they first need to address the 75 years of injustice, using language, choosing words of the same high intensity used for any other group committing injustice. Our leaders need to urge a referral to the International Criminal Court to conduct investigations into both sides, crimes against humanity and war crimes, and to prosecute persons responsible for such crimes. Then let us take actions according to the outcome. Justice comes before peace. Then we can work on returning conditions to its original state, where Jews, Muslims, Christians, and those with no faith can once again live together peacefully as brothers and sisters as they did before the 1948 Nakba. Mr. Mayor, I will conclude by sharing a poem called Write My Name by Zaina Azam. The poem highlights the deepest sadness in our hearts after seeing footage of Palestinian adults and children carrying bags which contain the limbs of their family members. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Use the black permanent marker with the ink that doesn't bleed if it gets wet, the one that doesn't melt when it's exposed to heat. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Make the lines thick and clear. Add your special flourishes so I can take comfort in seeing my mama's handwriting when I go to sleep. Write my name on my leg, Mama. On the legs of my sisters and brothers. This way we will belong together. This way we'll be known as your children. Write my name on my leg, Mama, when the bombs hit our houses, when the walls crush our skulls and bones. Our legs will tell our story of how they were nowhere for us to run. Mr. Mayor, I support this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 20,000 people dead in Palestine. More than 1 million displaced. Mosques bombed. Churches bombed. Schools bombed. Refugee camps bombed. UN facilities bombed. Hospitals bombed. Children killed. This is the reality of what is happening in this, on the ground in Gaza. I was looking through the names and ages of the kids that have died, and the first 10 pages, more than 10 pages now, who hadn't even reached the age of 1. Their age was classed as 0. Some were so young that they hadn't even been given a name. They were all too young to realize that they were Palestinians, but they all died because they were Palestinians, Mr. Mayor. In all, more than 7,000 innocent children have been killed. 7,000 is not just a mere number. All of us in this chamber represent a ward of around 5,000 to 5,500 people. Imagine that. The whole of our wards wiped out. The whole of Barrowford wiped out. Briarfield wiped out. Bradley wiped out. 7,000, I'm talking about kids. More than 20,000 all have died. The reality is, Mr. Mayor, that we would struggle to imagine it. But the innocent civilians of Gaza are living in this real nightmare. If you can't imagine that, then imagine this. As a parent, you give birth to a premature baby who needs 24-hour intensive care. He needs that care to survive in hospital. Imagine then how you would feel when that electricity and power is turned off and that premature baby starts gasping for air, begins to suffocate. They shiver to death because their incubator is not working to keep them alive. If you still can't imagine that, then here is a picture. Here is a picture of the premature babies. There were 39 altogether. We all saw that in the news. 8 of them are now dead. This was at the time that Sunak and Starmer were saying, and as they continue to say, no to a ceasefire. If you can't see that then, Mr. Mayor, listen to this then. That is the cry of a child child.
It's a shame.
Shame, sir. Just take your time. Just take a deep breath.
A child crying out for his mother. He survived. And more. If these were your kids, your grandkids, and loved ones, would you not support a ceasefire? Of course you would. The message from this chamber and from this area should be a very simple one from both sides. Stop killing the children. Let them play. Let them be the light of their parents. Just let them live. And I say that for both sides, Mr. Mayor. It is important to say that what Hamas did was also an atrocity. Of course it was. And we condemn acts of violence against innocent civilians. And yet, despite all of this suffering, Mr. Mayor, we've seen our local MP who's made it very clear that in open correspondence that he doesn't support a ceasefire. He doesn't even bother turning up to the vote in Parliament, as my colleague Councillor Ashram said. And then, of course, we have the leader of the Labour Party, Mr. Starmer, who made the despicable comments on LBC interview, which was the reason I and Councillor Ashraf resigned. Mr. Mayor, a member of this council asked me yesterday why I had left my colleagues. I told him this, and I'll tell you the same. I did not leave my colleagues, I left the party. It was never a personal issue, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. If I can have with your permission, Mr. Mayor, with your discretion. You have that discretion. If I can have another minute. And it was never personal against me for leaving the Labour Party, Mr. Mayor. And there are some people, and I say some, and I emphasise some, that have made it personal. And that's fine. I can live with that. It doesn't bother me. Following my resignation, though, I do have one regret, and it is only one regret. And it's a big one. And it's that I should have done it earlier. I should not have waited a week. I shouldn't have had faith in the leadership of the Labour Party. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to finish on this. I was also asked by someone in the political circle as to what I've done, what I've achieved by resigning. And I'll tell you what I've achieved, Mr. Mayor. I've achieved a good night's sleep. I can sleep at night comfortably, knowing that with a good conscience I can sleep. Mr. Mayor, I've got an amendment to move. If I may, I think Councillor Ahmed moved an amendment. It wasn't seconded, so I don't know if you want to take my amendment now. Was it accepted?
Accepted.
Well, I've got a further amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a further... I've got an amendment, but I don't know if you want me to raise that now or...
Yes, you may raise it now.
Well, Mr. Mayor, can I've got a few extra copies, if that's it, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if you want to have them. Mr. Mayor, as Trish is handing out the amendment, so there's no issue with the substantive motion, but we add a number of extra sections which obviously members will see as Trish is coming around. And it reads as this: there can be no justification for the loss of innocent lives, and all atrocities committed by civilians against civilians must be condemned and investigated. All forms of racism, including anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, have no place in our area, and we condemn any attacks on Palestinian, Jewish or Muslim people. And this is the important part. Sir Keir Starmer was wrong to say in an interview with LBC Radio that Israel does have that right to withhold food, water and electricity from Gaza, and he should apologise and retract this statement supporting collective punishment. And then the fourth one, Mr. Mayor, is about Mr. Stevenson, and he should explain why he did not support the calls for a ceasefire and why he did not attend the vote in Parliament when the issue was being discussed. Mr. Stevenson should apologise to the people of Kendal for failing to represent their views. And it's important, Mr. Mayor, that we include this section because At the moment, the way the motion is read, it's all against the government, the Prime Minister, and I think the leader of the Conservative Party, Mr. Councillor Ahmed, was right to say that should be all parties added to this. And I think that we need to go further and make our position clear within the motion. So that is my amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, can I just say this, Mr. Mayor? Just so Councillor Nadine Ahmed said, obviously, ask all the political parties. Can I just also clarify, the Liberal Democrats, including their leader, all voted for a ceasefire.
Okay, thank you. Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, the last month has been horrific. We have seen a massacre of over 12,000 innocent civilians with over half of them being children. A child was killed every 10 minutes. I, along with hundreds of councillors, wrote to the government asking for an immediate ceasefire. Mr. Mayor, this war began on October 7th. This has been going on for over 70 years. The world has sat back and watched the massacre of tens of thousands of men, women and children. What we are watching is non-fiction genocide, and if we don't stop the IDF, the world will witness ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Gaza. I am shocked beyond words that in the 21st century, that America and Britain are so quiet whilst live pictures show what's happening. Maybe if Gaza had oil reserves like Libya or Iraq, we would have seen prompt intervention. Israel are breaking numerous international laws, including UN resolutions and the laws of war and occupation, stated in the 4th Geneva Convention with simply no accountability. On Thursday, the chief executive of Oxfam said that what's happening in Gaza is collective punishment, which is war crime. He said we have 31 members of staff in Gaza who are running for their lives instead of delivering aid. That's why the only way we can have peace is for a permanent two-state solution. We need a secure Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. We need an international investment program to rebuild Gaza from the rubble. More than ever, we need a permanent ceasefire. Mr. Mayor, we need a free Palestine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Free Palestine.
All right, please. Any more speakers? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is quite emotional. I didn't obviously prepare for this the way I should have done. I've seen my colleague Yasser. I think sometimes you get taken to a place you get taken to a place you've never been before. I had a speech, it's quite long. Just for those who are wondering why this guy can't take out the words from his mouth.
Well, we totally understand.
Especially given my day job, I get paid for the words that come out of my mouth. Just like Councillor Iqbal, but we're all human. We all have feelings. It's interesting to note, actually, that the national flower of Palestine is the poppy. Not many of us probably were aware of that. I certainly wasn't, and it took me by quite some surprise as to the history behind the connection with the poppy. Colleagues have far more eloquently than myself have expressed their feelings and emotions on this motion. By in my view, in no doubt should be a unanimous support for the motion. Mr. Mayor, the lands of Palestine have far more in them which unite. Which unite rather than divide. Which brings me on to my final point, because I clearly can't deal with this, because what happens next? We have a ceasefire, we all go away, some of us fight elections, some of us may come back, some of us may not. But what we should all be striving for is to find that platform of unity. That platform of unity which will give that Palestinian child a chance to live, a chance to become something of themselves, just like we all have. I'm going to leave it there, Mr. Mayor, and I'd urge colleagues to support this motion unanimously.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'm here as a human being, and I'm here to support everybody here. But one thing we should really look at, and I'm glad Councillor Wick mentioned it, is permanent. So this moment in time is a ceasefire because of the atrocities. Just says 250, 10 per day, gives a 3 day. That means 25 days, there's no atrocities, and there's nothing to bargain with. So the word permanent is vital. We can look to the old one, we can watch telly all the time, but in 25 days or it ends tomorrow, the war starts again, and then there's more atrocities. But between then and then, what happens? It's not good. So the word permanent is really prominent, and we should go for that word permanent. And not, we don't should daily lives to think like this. We're all human, whether Palestinian or Catholic, Jewish, whatever, we're all human beings. So let's get this permanent word up there and in front. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I wasn't intending to speak, but I think the sentiments echoed by a number of colleagues and the amendment before us. I mean, this council has a unique history, and in terms of this particular conflict, if you go back to 2012, for example, this council moved a motion in terms of the Palestine-Israel issue. We as a council led in terms of the peace march that particular weekend. That's 12 years ago, 11 years ago, Mr. Mayor. And it's no secret that in 2022, last year, we had an emergency motion where we discussed and debated the issue of Palestine again and what happened there. There was a unanimous agreement in this council chamber. As a result of that, again, no common secret, I was accused of being anti-Semitic. I want to restate for the public record, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not Islamophobic. I've fought for 25 years against racism of all forms and will continue to do so, whether people believe it or not. But in terms of trying to, you asked Mr. Bell, you mentioned at the offset, let's try and find a solution. I don't think what a solution is, that we've got one amendment on the table. I know the leader of the council, to his credit, has called for this extraordinary meeting, and that is commendable. But I think the last thing that the public of our borough want us to happen is for us to be divided, because if we're divided, the community out there is divided, and Councillor David Wick picked up on that when he spoke. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move that we, with your indulgence, have a 10-minute recess to look at the amendment that's been tabled, and and try and come up with a collective motion that everybody can agree on in this chamber and outside.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more speakers, please?
Is there a reason?
Kieran,
Are you going to have a reason?
when you spoke. And you, please?
So I will read from the words of Councillor Martin Stone, that wanted to say them. He wanted to be here, but he can't. I've nothing further to add personally that will contribute to the conversation so far. All speeches from members been thoughtful, passionate, and very well eloquently put so far. And I must admit, I think touched and agree with the sentiment that's been put forward thus far. So Martin wanted to contribute this evening as following. This is before Yasser's amendment, obviously, not to comment on the amendment, but it was obviously before the latest amendment. So Martin says, unfortunately I'm unable to attend tonight's meeting, but wanted to express my strong support for tonight's resolution. The terrible humanitarian situation in Gaza is a direct consequence of the Israeli actions and requires an immediate ceasefire, as outlined in the resolution. The resolution is also right to ask the Council to write to the Prime Minister, asking him to support international law and its application in the context of Israel. The UK can't preach to the world about a rules-based order while simultaneously ignoring international law and norms in the context of Israeli actions. This is very widely seen throughout the world as another example of Western double standards and hypocrisy. It further undermines and erodes what remaining influence the UK has in the Middle East. Many Pendle residents are concerned about the shocking situation in Gaza, and they rightly expect their representatives to care about this too. If I had been able to attend tonight, I would have voted for this resolution without reservation. It's not just the right thing to do from a humanitarian perspective, it's also the right thing to do morally and ethically. So those were the words of Martin.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak in support of this amendment. I think that it's abysmal that the two main parties of this country did not support a move to peace, a move to ceasefire. And I think that we should hold the leaders of the political ethos to account. The MP Andrew Stevenson did not attend the vote in Parliament, and Sir Keir Starmer obviously made his comments, which I find very unfavorable. Mr. Mayor, the Liberal Democrats, the SNP, Labour Pine Group, and other small political groups did all vote for a ceasefire. I think it's time that the two main parties did so as well, Mr. Mayor. So I do
Right, I think we will have a short recess and return shortly. Thank you very much.
Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for his worship. Councillor Brian Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for his worship, the Mayor of Pendle, Councillor Brian Newman.
Thank you, councillors. Please be seated. Thank you, councillors, for giving everybody a bit of time to reflect. Let's hope that the conclusion is a good one. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr.
Mr. Mayor, firstly, can I thank you for allowing us the opportunity for that recess, and I think it has proved useful to have discussions with various leaders and my deputy sits beside me. In terms of the motion then, Mr. Mayor, obviously there was a friendly amendment which I think has been accepted. If I can take you back to the motion again. In terms of the bullet point, at page 3 of the amendment, we add, and I can take you back to my amendment, points Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2 comes just underneath the bullet point. So where it says there is a danger that extended conflict may have adverse effects, the next point should read, there can be no justification for the loss of innocent lives, and all atrocities committed against civilians must be condemned and investigated. And in the further bullet point, it says all forms of racism, including anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, have no place in our area, and condemns any attacks on Palestinian, Jewish, Muslims, or people of any other faith. I think that's a further amendment. So, Jane, I think I'll send it across to you. So that covers everybody, not just people of faith, covering all faiths and none. And then, turning to Roman numeral 3, Mr. Mayor, where it says, Sir Keir Starmer was wrong to say in an interview with LBC Radio that Israel does have that right to withhold free water and electricity from Gaza. If I can just ask you to pause there. This was a matter of contention, but frankly I think we have to reach some form of consensus. That section which I read up to Gaza, it goes within the preamble of the motion. And I'm looking at the leaders if I'm saying anything wrong, I'm sure I'll be intervening. So that part of the motion becomes part of the preamble. And then going back to the actual resolution where it says this council also resolves to ask the chief executive to, and we go on page 3, it goes up to E, and we've got F. I think I'll get an amendment by, I'm not sure, Councillor Levy was. Then the new section would be G, and G should say that the council also resolves to ask the chief executive to write to the leader of the opposition, Mr. Keir Starmer, and ask him to apologise and retract this statement, or retract the statement supporting collective punishment. And this was a key thing which, for me personally, was important, and I personally couldn't concede at that point. That's important. That's the feeling of the people, of members, of, in fact, I'd argue some Labour Party councillors. So it's important that... And Conservative councillors. Of course they would. So this is the key part, and I think it's important that we keep that in, and we that sentiment is then reflected in this council motion. Then, Mr. Mayor, H also becomes this council also resolves to ask the chief executive to, and I'll read this out, and if I'm wrong with this, I'm sure one of the Conservative councillors will correct me. Write to Andrew Stevenson and ask him to explain why he did not support the calls for a ceasefire, and why he did not attend the vote in Parliament when the issue was being discussed. Full stop. Then the next sentence. The next sentence. We also asked him to represent the views of his constituents and call for an immediate ceasefire. I'm looking at Councillor Ahmed to see if that's the wording that I think that's the wording we did. Yes. I think the word, represent the views of his constituents in the future, I think is the word, and call for an immediate ceasefire.
For future.
So just to be clear, ask him to represent the views of his constituents in the future and call for an immediate ceasefire. Permanent ceasefire. Permanent and immediate. I'll see the views of permanent ceasefire. And again, this was another part, Mr. Mayor, which is important because we obviously don't want to politicise it, but actually in a way it is as well. That he's the MP of this constituency, and it's important that he gets the sentiment and feelings from this council. I think there was nothing else, Mr. Mayor, that we did discuss. And that's my amendment, Mr. Mayor. I think there's already a second. I'm not sure if we need another amendment. A seconder to that further amendment, but
Mr. Mayor, it's a friendly amendment.
I think it's accepted.
The leader of the leader.
And can I, before I sit down, just thank the leadership of the various parties. I think genuinely we sat down and we said that we need consensus at this point, we need unanimity, because this is an issue which, and the independent, both two independents, A and B, as they're termed on the council website. I think that was the key thing, and I'm grateful to all of them for the unanimity that we've shown. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor.
Thank you. I think the adjournment was really helpful. We had some frank and honest discussions, and I think we've come to the right decision where the people in the room and hopefully the whole chamber shortly will vote on the agreed wording which Councillor Iqbal has just spoken on. I think it's important that we send a clear message from Pendle that we are unanimous, we are working together, because I think what my concern was, which I raised in the meeting, was what we don't want to do is be raising amendments and voting them down and coming to further changes to the original motion. So I think it's sensible discussion we've had, and hopefully we can now move forward and unanimously vote us through.
Right, okay. Shall we go to the vote then? Okay.
Mr Mayor,
Sorry.
if I may, it was moved as a friendly amendment. I think the mover of the original motion needs to accept that it isn't being incorporated. And
Right.
we're not voting on an amendment, we're voting on a substantive motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Right, so we now go to the vote on the amendment. Oh, okay, on the principal motion then. All in favour? Anybody against? Thank you very much for that. I'm sure. Thank I'd like to thank everyone for their calmness and their ability to work together. This is where we must
Please be upstanding for worship the Mayor of Pendle, Councillor Brian Newman.
Thank you, James.